Today's tutorial is all about linoleum or Linocut prints. You can go directly from photographs to create these really beautiful handmade prints, or you can freehand designs for a truly creative touch. I will list all my materials in the description box, and first thing, you're going to take your photograph or your hand-drawn design, or you can create a composite collage digitally, and you're going to transfer it to your linoleum. I prefer to use Blick Wonder Cut linoleum. I think it just cuts really well, and I'm using Sally's graphite transfer paper to transfer my image to the linoleum. So think carbon paper, but a little bit more a little less expensive. I'm using a pen so that I can make sure that I can see each line that I've traced, and it's a good idea to test your work before you get this far. So you can remove your paper and make sure that it's actually transferring. As you press down with the pen, the graphite's going to push down into the linoleum to transfer your design. So once you think you're finished, unwrap your linoleum, making sure, of course, that the graphite side is down, and then you have your design ready to outline in Sharpie. The thing with linoleum printmaking is there are a lot of steps. First, you have to come up with your design, then you have to transfer it to your linoleum, then you outline it in Sharpie, and finally you carve. So it's very important here to understand clear areas of black and white and exactly what lines you are going to be carving. You do not want to guess when you have a Sharpie in your hand or a linoleum cutter. It is time consuming, but printmaking has to be precise. Once everything has been outlined in Sharpie, it's time to start carving. So I use the Speedball linoleum cutters, and it has 4 different gouges. I'm going to show you how to change the gouges that are stored in the handle. However, I do not let my students do this. I change it for them and just lay out a certain number of each size. Actually comes with 5 different gouges or cutters. I do remove number 6. They skip 4 for some reason because it's a pure blade and my students cut themselves the most with it, so we don't have time for that. This is blade number 1, one of my favorites for fine details. It's super teeny tiny. Number 2, of course, is a little bit larger. Then 3, I don't know why we skip 4, and then 5. So let's go ahead and put the blades we're not using back. And then you're gonna twist to the left, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, until these 2 pieces separate. And this is where the blade or the cutter is going to go. So I'm gonna take it all the way apart so you can see what it looks like on the inside. You can see it's rounded, and then this piece fits perfectly on top to create a C shape. And then your cutter is gonna go into that C-shaped divot, which will, if you fully tighten it, won't be there, but if you loosen it, it will. Let me show you what I mean. So putting it back on, I am turning it to the right to tighten. And you see how you can see a separation there, but then if you go all the way to the right, boom, it completely closes, which is what keeps your cutter secure. Going back to the left, there's 2 sides to every cutter. One, the side you're cutting with, and then a spoon-like smooth shape that fits beautifully into these 2 sections. Turning all the way to the right, it's nice and secure, and it's ready to carve linoleum. The most important thing is always, always, always keep your non-dominant hand behind the lino cutter. So it does not matter how careful you think you are. If your hand is holding the lino cutter or holding your linoleum and your lino cutter is going towards it, the chance of you cutting yourself is so much higher. So with muscle memory here, instead of moving your hand, move the linoleum to get the curve and the design that you would like. And that's going to help you not cut yourself, and that's going to also help you get a more precise cut. The way I'm using the lino cutter is, think about it like you're ice skating or roller skating. You want to keep the lino cutter completely parallel with the linoleum. So you might press it down a little bit to get your initial cut, but then you're sliding across the linoleum like a boat on water. You don't want to dip down. You're not shoveling the linoleum. You are gliding across. Get in the habit of using the variety of gouges that are provided with the lino cutter. So don't just do the fine liner. My students love that one, but it just doesn't cut quite as much. Think of that as detail work. I tend to like the number 2 gouge, the medium one. I feel like it has a really good balance of cutting away large areas, but also I can get a really nice fine lines. See how I can kind of curve around these round shapes. And again, I am rotating and moving my linoleum for an easier cut, and so that I do not cut myself. With your linoleum cutting, anything that is not black, you are removing, and everything that you created with Sharpie is going to be the ink. So this is like a stamp, and you are removing all the areas that you do not want the ink to catch. You can see now I'm moving on to the cat. So never start in the areas of most importance. So for example, I did my background areas first, and I'm avoiding the cat's face altogether until I really get the hang of things. So even now, I'm cutting away at the large areas, and then I'm going in and focusing on the larger areas of the face. I do have a little bit of an issue in my design. There's a lot of small little line work areas that I think are going to be really difficult to carve. So be very purposeful with your Sharpie and with your design to make sure you know exactly what you're carving and exactly what you're leaving behind. It's a little bit tricky, but with practice and with a lot of patience, you can really get those areas, and be prepared for it to change a little bit. It doesn't matter how prepared I think I am with my design. It always shifts and changes. You can control the Linocutter, of course, but things just seem to happen once you get started carving. You can always do a test print. You can always do the marker test, which I'll show you soon, to make sure you've carved the areas that you like. One thing that's easy to do is to get carve happy and just to carve too much away. I've had students ask, how do I add the linoleum back? And the short answer is you really can't. We do this after working with clay. So students are like, can I score, slip, and blend? And sadly, the answer is no. It just kind of is what it is. So you can see the fine liner here is great for small little details like the highlight of the eye, but it just doesn't cut deep enough for all the major details. So don't get too happy with that fine liner. Use it kind of at the end for your detail work. I'm going in here and I am going to change my design a little bit, remove some of those lines that I drew and keep the body of the cat a little bit more simple. Doing my whiskers here, and I love how they cut across the background. I think visually that's going to be a really interesting part of this work of art. And I'm just going to continue carving, taking breaks as needed, making sure not to get too overwhelmed. Usually when I do this in the classroom, the carving takes several days, but I will say getting the design and getting the design transferred to the linoleum takes a little bit longer. This is the marker test, and I'm taking an Expo dry erase marker and I'm scrubbing it over my details to see what it looks like with black. So this isn't as perfect as doing a test print, but what it does is show you what your lines actually look like when you've carved it. And then you can go back and touch up areas that maybe you didn't get as neatly as you thought you would. However, there's nothing like printing to really know if you got it right. I'm using block printing ink and I'm applying it here using multi-directions, and then I'm applying it to my linoleum, making sure to go horizontally and vertically. Then I'm gonna line up my linoleum, put my paper on top, and with clean hands, I'm gonna buff the surface all the way around. So I am not using a printing press with this. Then I'm gonna pull my first print. I always start with white paper. And not bad. It could use a little bit more ink. If I'm not happy at this point, I could stop, wipe off the linoleum, and then keep carving. Instead, I'm gonna add more ink and I'm gonna pull a second print to see what it looks like. That one got more ink and I spent more time buffing the edges with my hands. Don't forget your details in your corners. Go back and reapply ink. And then I'm gonna move on to a more colorful piece of paper. Again, printing by hand with my linoleum down, my paper on top, pulling my print, and that's a really fun variation. I think the lime green works really well with the background pattern. This is a ghost print where you just pull the print with the leftover ink. Really great for going back in and drawing, and really great for adding color later. Now I'm using a piece of watercolor paper that I painted on earlier, and this creates really cool designs. This is something I do in my classroom as well. And there it is. The beauty of printmaking is how you can create multiples and how it's so step oriented. And this is a great thing to do at home or in the art classroom. Thank you so much for sticking around and making art with me. And if you're interested in more tutorials, check these out. Find my website, thatartteacher.com, for full-length student examples, lesson plans, and videos, all for free.